Welcome to Exhuming the Truth, the podcast that is dedicated to cold cases, missing persons, systemic injustices, and the art of forensic science that seeks answers when silence remains. My name is Asha and I am a forensic scientist and a criminologist, and in each episode we examine the evidence, the systems, and the human stories that are often left behind. This isn't just about true crime, it's about truth. It's about accountability, and it's about giving a voice to those who deserve to be heard. Thank you so much for being here. Let's jump right in. Hi guys, happy Tuesday or whatever day it is that you're having a listen today. I hope everybody is doing well and had a beautiful Easter weekend. I'm really excited to do today's podcast because I put quite a bit of work into it, and it's something that it's not quite often that I listen to or watch or learn about a case and it really gets me quite uncomfortable. I think I'm quite used to a lot of different types of stories, and while they make me sad, I don't often get like incredibly uncomfortable like I have with the one that I've researched today. So I am kind of looking forward to it being a bit more of a passionate episode. What else have I got to share for you, however, in housekeeping, sorry. Kids are back at school. I've been getting a lot of work done. It's fantastic. It's very quiet though, so I do miss the noise. We do have, if you didn't listen to, or you did listen to our guest episode on guilt with Ryan Wolf, that is now a video on their YouTube channel. So if you prefer to sit and watch a podcast, you can do that. I was not prepared for that, however, going into it. I thought it was just going to be recorded, so I put absolutely no effort into my appearance. So you will probably be able to tell I won't be watching it back for that reason. However, if that's what you're into, that's what you're into. Last week, it was quite funny because before the honeymoon, I downloaded some podcasts to listen to on the plane. And I had downloaded one called the Nan Up 4, I think that's what it was called, but it was an ABC podcast and it had really great ratings. And I'm not 100% familiar with the case. I know the gist of it, but I don't know the ins and outs. I couldn't tell you the exact names of all four of the missing people or anything like that. And I thought, I'm going to listen to that on the plane. And then I thought, Asha, like, you're going on honeymoon, give it a rest. Like, listen to something a bit more, chill and less worky. So I didn't. And then upon coming home, I got contacted by Dominique, who actually produces that podcast, which was so funny because I said to her, I was literally going to listen to this last week. However, she contacted me and she wanted to have a chat. So she came over to my house. She is from ABC. Her and her beautiful camera lady, who I have forgotten her name, and I'm so sorry, that's so rude, but she was so lovely. Both of them were so incredibly easy to talk to, kind. I had a great time with them, welcomed them into the house, had a chat. We spoke about missing people, and it is, of course, in context to the Nan Up 4 case, but I spoke a bit about missing persons, families, barriers, and the barriers with the police and things like that. So we had a really good chat, and she's going to use some of that audio here and there for some articles, I think for one or two of the episodes on the Nan Up podcast. And I think she said she was going to be using some of the video footage for a show on ABC. So I'll keep you updated on that. We also had today, I had another lady, Annie, reach out to me from ABC Regional, I think that's what it's called. She is a radio host for the ABC. So Dominique has obviously got in contact with her. I had a chat with her about basically the same things this afternoon, which I'm going to add that chat in at the end of this episode in case you missed it and you wanted to have a listen. She was lovely too. It was very brief, that one, the radio interview, which I actually really loved because I was in my trackies and my Ugg boots and no one could see me, so that was great. So basically that's kind of all I've got to update you with. We have a lot going on behind the scenes still with paperwork and things like that, but hopefully this week we should be able to open our Exhuming the Truth Hope Project not-for-profit bank account, which is very exciting, which means we can start applying for grants and helping more families. Yeah, there's so much going on right now, but I just have to say that every bit of attention on all of the cases that we cover is just so important. And really working with the families and getting to know them, it makes everything that much more meaningful. And yeah, I really love the community that we've built. You guys are awesome. You're so supportive of all of the families and non-judgmental, and we absolutely love you for that. So that's basically what's been going on. Yeah, just a lot of paperwork, so much paperwork. I'm, going cross-eyed a little bit, but I'm really in a good space with work right now. And, while we haven't got funding yet, I'm hopeful for the future. And even if we don't, I'm still here doing my thing. I'm not going anywhere, much to a lot of people's disappointment. But, this is Exhuming the Truth. And today we have an episode, like I said at the start of this little chat, that made me really uncomfortable. And when I read about it online, it was something that I went back and forward on, because I was like, oh, this makes me feel a bit sick. And then I thought, who am I to sit there and be like, I'm not reading this because it makes me feel sick? There's victims out there affected by this. And it's something that hits home to, it should hit home to every woman, because it's crimes that are unbelievable and happening in our own homes. So today we are doing an episode on exposing a global rape academy as CNN investigates this. This is a CNN as equals investigation. We have used a lot of information from CNN and a lot of external resources, which we've popped in the podcast notes. So if you wanted to have a bit more of a read or verify where any information has come from, that's where it is. But welcome to today's episode. There is a disclaimer that I'm going to speak at the start of this episode just because of how heavy the content is. So let's jump into it. Welcome back to Exhuming the Truth. I'm Asha, and today's episode is not just confronting, it's exposing something far more complex than a single crime or even a single offender. We're talking about systems and networks and the disturbing reality that sexual violence is not always isolated. Sometimes it is organised. A recent investigation by CNN uncovered what has been described as a global online rape academy. Now, this is a network where individuals allegedly share tactics and strategies and methods to drug, assault, and exploit women, and not just any women they're in a relationship with, women that they're married to. And this is not just about what happens behind closed doors anymore. This is about what happens in digital spaces that facilitate real-world harm. Today we're looking at this, and it's one of the most disturbing online investigations I think I've ever come across, and if not the most disturbing investigation I've come across. And it's what CNN, like I said, described as a so-called rape academy. Behind that headline is a much deeper story about misogyny and digital radicalization, even exploitation, and the dangerous communities that can thrive in plain sight online and in your own home. In this episode, I'm going to examine what CNN uncovered and why it matters and what it really says about the systems that are failing to protect women and girls in their own homes. But before we really begin, there absolutely has to be an independent content and trigger warning. As this episode discusses sexual violence and exploitation, we talk about misogyny and online abuse, and some listeners, if not most, will find this really distressing, and as I did myself in reading about it. So please take care of yourself while you're listening, and as always, feel free to pause or step away if you need to. It's also super important to say from the outset that stories like this one are not about shock value or headlines, and they're about real harm with real victims, and they have been covered in part with very dangerous systems that have allowed this abuse to grow unchecked. What CNN actually uncovered. The CNN investigation exposed online communities where members were allegedly exchanging information about essentially how to commit sexual assault. And they're not just fantasies or discussion, but actual instructions and guidance and encouragement. Now, these spaces reportedly included advice on drugging their victims, including methods to avoid detection, discussions around consent manipulation, and in some cases, actual documentation of assaults. This is what makes this so significant, because it shifts the narrative from individual offending to literal networked behavior. And in criminology, that distinction really matters because networks actually amplify harm. And not only that, they actually normalize behavior and reduce the psychological barriers to offending. Now, when individuals enter spaces where abuse is validated, it no longer feels deviant, it feels acceptable to these men. Now, when you go to research about what we're talking about and what CNN have uncovered, it takes you to the CNN website. And I'm going to talk you through this because it starts off with a screen warning of what you're about to encounter. And they have made this kind of interactive screenplay with a man they have given an alias name to. And they say that this man lives in Poland and he's married to a woman and they live together and that woman's in her 40s. Now, there's no identifying factors for the real man behind this alias, but CNN needs you to know that he is a person and this is very real. Now, going undercover and posing as a user in a private group chat on the messaging app Telegram, CNN had received messages in real time from this man who was found to be in this group. Now, there's also messages from others. I'm going to read a couple to you. Now, a lot of them use the hashtag #ICheck, and I'll explain that in a moment to you after I read out a couple of these messages. Now, there's one that said, "Who has experienced drugging their wives? Been wanting to do this to my missus. I managed to record a clip once when I had my last 2 blurred pills." Now, when I say blurred pills, it's just crossing out what the pills were. I'm unsure why. It's obviously due to the investigation, but I'm unsure what pills they're referring to. I know that there's a lot of sleeping pills in that for context. Another message says, "My wife doesn't even know that I recorded it." And another message says, "Drug her." Now, all of these messages are from various users in this group labeled ZZZ, insinuating that these women are asleep. Now, when I spoke about the hashtag #ICheck, there's literally video and image footage of these men drugging their wives or girlfriends and filming themselves pull their eyelids up to show that the female is unconscious at that time. That's when they're using that hashtag #ICheck. Now, this group was filled with men from all across the world. Don't be fooled into thinking because we're talking about this one man who is in Poland that it's just in Poland. This is worldwide, with USA being the top users, okay? Now, this group is filled with men from everywhere exchanging advice on how to drug and film the sexual assault of their partners while they're unconscious. I'm talking videos, I'm talking photos, and I'm talking thousands of users. Thousands. One of them said, "How much are you willing to pay to watch me F my wife while she sleeps?" Like, absolutely gut-wrenching content. Going through this website honestly made me feel sick, and I did it in 3 parts. I did not do it all in one day because it really made me feel sick to my stomach. Now, when we're talking from online to offline, I want to briefly touch on the Pelicot case, because to understand how online environments like this disgusting one I'm talking about, how they translate into the real world and into real world violence, we need to look at one of the most disturbing cases in recent history. Now, I am talking about Dominique Pelicot. Now, between 2011 and 2020, Pelicot drugged his wife repeatedly and invited dozens of men to rape her while she was unconscious. He documented the abuse and he organized it against his own wife, and critically, he connected with others. Now, this was not impulsive violence. It was structured, it was planned, and it was sustained for over nearly a bloody decade, you guys. More than 50 men were convicted in connection with this case, and what shocked so many people across the globe was not just the scale, but who these men were. Ordinary individuals from a wide range of professions. I'm talking like everyone. There is no single profile of an offender. What matters more is environment and opportunity. This is reinforcement. This is showing us that this can be any man from anywhere with any background. And even more powerful was the decision by Giselle, who was the victim. Now, Giselle Pelicot actually decided to waive her right to an anonymous trial, and she decided to make it public. And she actually stated clearly that the shame should not belong to the victims, it should belong to the perpetrators. And that single act shifted the global conversation around this type of crime because it exposed something many people struggled to accept, and these crimes do not exist in isolation. They're enabled, sometimes quietly, sometimes collectively, but they are certainly enabled. And this was just the beginning of what we're looking at here with this quote-unquote rape academy that CNN has uncovered. There are so many men across the globe doing this and in our own homes, and it's absolutely gut-wrenching and disgusting. Now, when we talk about the psychology of not just abuse and this type of abuse, but the psychology of networked abuse, because this is what it is. This is people in group settings encouraging each other and profiting off this, selling the content, consuming the content. Now, this group of the quote-unquote rape academy, had more than 63 million hits. Now, I have read the most vile comments from men online saying, you realize this isn't 63 million individual men, it's 63 million hits in total. I don't give a flying fuck how many people made that 63 million hit on that website and those videos and that content. That is way too fucking much. And even one man on there is way too many. Now, we know that there's more than one man. We know that there's thousands of men participating in this. And even that in itself, it just makes me sick. So how does something like this even happen? Who starts this? Why do people participate? The answer lies in three key dynamics. And first and foremost, it is normalization. When harmful behavior is repeated and validated within a group setting, it becomes perceived as acceptable, which it obviously is not. However, the amount of people contributing to this absolutely vile act, or even just the act of the conversation itself, they're normalizing this. Now, the second is the diffusion of responsibility. Again, when there's multiple people who are involved, the individual accountability gets diluted. No one feels fully responsible because they're all participating. And then third and lastly, the reinforcement. These environments reward harmful behavior and people are even profiting through this. They're getting validated. Their status is, getting promoted. They feel like they belong. This is not just criminal behavior. It's a social behavior, and that makes it that much more dangerous. Now, you might be thinking at this point that this is sickening and disgusting, but it's not happening here. Well, think again, because I'm going to give you some Australian context. It's a different system, but it's the same pattern. Now, of course, this is, all research-based, and it is alleged, so I'm going to put all of the references at the end if you want to take a look. But hear me out, because while the CNN investigation highlights online networks, Australia has seen similar underlying patterns within institutions. Now, I'm talking about Victoria Police. Multiple reports and an independent review identified systemic issues around sexual harassment and workplace culture. Now, this was led by Gillian Triggs through the Australian Human Rights Commission, and the findings revealed this: the widespread experiences of harassment, the lack of trust in reporting systems, the fear of career consequences. This is important because while the context is different from CNN and the CNN investigation itself, the underlying dynamics are the same. It's a power imbalance, there's silence, there's cultural protection, and this is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable because it challenges the idea that these are rare or isolated incidents when they are not. It's patterns. We're seeing patterns in so many different areas. Why do these systems persist? Whether we are talking about online networks or even the institutional environments, the same question applies. Why are they allowed to exist? Who is policing this? There are several key factors. Now, there is an obvious lack of oversight, an inadequate reporting system, cultural resistance to accountability, and prioritization of reputation over truth. Now, in online spaces, anonymity protects offenders. In institutions, the hierarchy protects them. Different structures, same outcome. Now, Telegram should be held partially responsible for this, for hosting such disgusting and vile content, but there's a broader implication, and it's not just about crime, it's about safety, because when harmful behaviour is normalised in any environment, it spreads, and it influences how individuals think and how they act and how they even respond to others. And this is why cases like the Pelicot trial matter. This is why investigations like this from the CNN matter, because they actually expose the patterns that would otherwise remain hidden. And we're then able to learn those patterns and recognise them in the future. What needs to change here, though? Basically everything, but what do we do with all of this information? First, we need to disrupt the online network, and these platforms like Telegram, they have to be monitored. They have to be regulated. They have to be held accountable. Like, what the hell is going on with that? Second, stronger legal frameworks, obviously, but not just in general, around the digital facilitation of crime, because enabling abuse is technically still participation. And third of all, the institutional reform. Independent reporting systems would help, external oversight and clear accountability. Cultural change, this is the hardest, because culture is not changed through policy alone. It's changed through, unfortunately, leadership and education, and it's consistent enforcement of consequences. Now, at its core, this episode is about a shift in understanding, and sexual violence is not always spontaneous or committed by a random, and it's often, as we've seen here, structured and reinforced, and it's undertaken in these thousands of cases by someone that you thought that you loved and trusted. Whether those systems are digital or institutional or not, this is so incredibly dangerous and disgusting, and it's terrifying. Now, before I go, I am going to play, I think it's about 7 minutes of our conversation with Annie on the ABC radio today, just in case you missed it, and I can refer people on. If not, thank you for joining us on this episode today. I know it was brief because this is an active investigation. So going deep into detail is not doable yet, but it will be in the foreseeable future, and we will be doing that. But I just want people to be aware, essentially, of what is going on. I don't want people to be hearing this for the first time in a few months' time. I think all women need to be made aware of this, and everybody needs to be so incredibly careful about who you trust, what you're doing online, what your loved ones are doing online. There's so many things that factor into this, and especially calling people out when they say or do things that, might be a precursor for this sort of participation. That's another huge one, and it has a lot to do with integrity and the way that you call out your friends and family when they make comments that make you uncomfortable. It all starts there. So thank you so much for joining us. Here is a little bit of our chat with Annie on ABC Regional Southwest WA.
Into the mysterious disappearance of Chantel and Leila McDougall, Simon Cadwell and Tony Popick from Nannup in 2007. An initial offer by the police to conduct another search for the four has since been withdrawn, and now the organisation of a new search could fall to the families of those missing loved ones. Now, Asha Carmody is a forensic biologist and criminologist and missing persons advocate from Exhuming the Truth. She has also helped to close missing persons cases. Hi, Asha, good to have you with us this afternoon.
Hi, Annie. Thanks so much for having me.
How often do you hear of this kind of result for families in missing persons cases, that they'll have to be the ones to organise another search themselves rather than the police carrying it out?
Look, it's incredibly common, and I don't know if you know, but right now across Australia, a long-term missing person is typically somebody who's been missing for longer than 3 months. And we currently have 2,600 plus across the country, which is absolutely absurd. And a lot of the time when people come to me, it's when they've hit sort of this level and they've had, their initial search, and then they kind of feel like maybe their missing loved one's case isn't being picked up, there's been no new leads, and it's gone very quiet, and that's typically when they come to me and I hear from them. So in just about almost every case I have, this is what I'm dealing with.
What are the typical reasons that police might decide against conducting another search for a missing person?
So, I mean, I can't speak exactly for their protocols. I know their parameters aren't huge, and they do have a threshold, but I know that a lot of the time they're operating basically waiting for new evidence. They're looking at the probability of the success if they do initiate another search. Typically, if a person goes missing, they do conduct a search initially, but in their terms, if they're having a look at like the probability and the resources, they're not going to stay out there for a month straight unless they think that, we've got this evidence or this lead to be here. So when all of those things kind of start to run dry over time, naturally, they've got no new information, there's a low survival rate, a low recovery rate, those resources just dry up. So I think a lot of the time, if they do initiate a new search, it's because somebody's actually phoned in with a new lead or they've got new evidence and they can work around that.
Are the police more likely to refuse to do another search in historical cases, though, like the Nannup 4? I'm not asking you to specifically comment on that case, but when you've got someone who's been missing for, in this case, nearly 20 years, are they more likely to kind of not allocate resources to that because it can be, I guess, much more difficult for them to get those leads that they need?
Yeah, I think so. And, with a situation like this, it's obviously gone cold in the eyes of the system, and historical cases like this are obviously significantly harder to justify new searches for, and that's largely because of how evidence naturally degrades over time forensically. The landscape changes. Nannup is, so much bush growth and erosion and development and things like that, and then obviously on top of that, your witness reliability, for example, that decreases. Your original search areas might not be relevant anymore. But I also like to give a little bit of window of hope, because in cases like this where there has been like an overlap of a decade or 2 decades, it's often when relationships change, people might go in or out of new relationships, and they might feel more comfortable to start speaking up and giving new information. So when something like that happens, yes, they absolutely would say, okay, we can reconsider this. But if they don't have anything new themselves, they don't have anything to base it off, it's significantly harder for them.
There have been some recent successful cases, though, where families have searched for the remains of missing loved ones and they've been found. I'm thinking of the case at the moment that's been highlighted by Australian Story, the Belgian hiker Celine Kremer, whose remains were found in Tassie earlier this year by volunteer bushwalkers after she'd gone missing bushwalking in 2023 and police had failed to find her. How often has there been that kind of successful search?
Look, that case is pretty incredible in itself, because I know the gentleman who sort of initiated that, Rob Parsons. He's an incredible survivalist. He does really great work. And it takes a person like Rob, who is, he knows the terrain, he knows how to handle the environment, and he was able to coordinate volunteer searches like that. It's not an easy task, and especially in that kind of environmental setting, it's not hugely common that this happens. Like, yes, if we do have a missing person and we try and coordinate a volunteer-run search, there's a lot of people in the community who want to be involved, and that's fantastic. But we need to consider, like the safety of those people, the terrain, all of these things come into play, and it's very uncommon when you look at the amount of long-term missing people we have if, something like this should happen. And I think that's why we've made it into an Australian story. Like, it's a pretty incredible effort out of Rob and all of the volunteers. But in a lot of cases, no, we're not overly successful. And I think that's part of the reason why we stopped in the first place.
Annette, one of our listeners, has sent us a message on the text line saying often or sometimes police won't listen to new leads or evidence. How would you respond to that?
It's really difficult because I obviously am in a bit of a grey area in between the families and the police. And the police, like I said, they have their parameters, and I don't know 100% how they operate, but I do work very closely with the families. And if you've got a missing loved one, you want everything to be done. And in my eyes, if that were me, no one's ever going to be doing a good enough job. I would say if you had new leads and things like that and they weren't followed up, that's incredibly frustrating, and people feel like they've got sort of nowhere to go if nobody's doing anything about it. So I see that a lot, and I hear it a lot from the families. It's a shame, but, you know, from our perspective, that's why we're here. We jump in and we try and help in those times where they're not getting the responses that they feel like that they need.
This is such an interesting discussion. We'll have to leave it there. Asha, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Asha Carmody, a missing persons advocate from Exhuming the Truth on ABC Radio WA. It must be.
Okay, so there's that. Hope you enjoyed it. I do get a lot of questions often about police and police work, and, you know, I understand. However, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I'm not a police officer by any means. And the work that I do, while it's not common, it does have its own lane. I don't investigate. I analyze. I can help, you know, bring new things to a case. I can help with searches and advocating and adding my forensic bit or my criminological bit or my behavioural bit, but I'm most certainly not a PI or a police officer. So those are the questions we get a lot. I actually had a lot of police-related questions with the other ABC interview, but hey, it is what it is. You know, I think it does come back largely to the system that kind of gives the police the rules that they need to sort of live by. Do I think that police should continue their search efforts for longer? Absolutely, I do. But do I see why they don't? Well, if they're told that they can't, then they can't. It's not like a personal thing on their end. It's their parameters. But that's why we exist, because we can continue to look, and we will continue to look. So, yeah, I hope you understand where I'm coming from, and I hope you enjoyed that as well. And also, thank you so much for joining me in today's episode. And I hope you have, look, I'd like to say enjoyed it. I hope you consumed the content and learnt something. There's not much to enjoy about what we had a chat about, but it is really important. Like I said, I've chucked some references down in regards to the CNN investigation, the Pelicot trial, the Australian Human Rights Commission review into Vic Pol, with the workplace findings and things like that. So you can go and have a further read. But thank you so much for joining me. Please jump onto our Facebook page and join our group, Sleuth Society. That's where most of the action is and will be in the future. If you feel like supporting us, you can do so. It's $1.49 per month. I've tried to make it as accessible to everybody as possible if you would like to help us. And please keep an eye out on our not-for-profit page, Exhuming the Truth Hope Project, because that is going to get very busy very soon. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Asha Carmody, and this is Exhuming the Truth.